Verið sæl og velkomin. I'm Hero, Icelandic teacher. So today we're gonna continue the story of Hrafnkell, the saga of Hrafnkell Freyskoða. Last time we learned that Hrafnkell has a horse he loves very much, whose name is Freyfaxi. And he loved him so much, he swore an oath. He said, "Ef maður reiður hestinum drep ég manninn, so I will kill anyone that rides Freyfaxi." And something very important that I want to stress is that, so the name of the saga is Hrafnkell Saga Freyskoða, so that means the saga of Hrafnkell the Godi of Frey. And as I said last time, Godi is a term that means chieftain, but also could mean priest. So in this case, calling him Freyskoða means that he was very devout of this god Freyr, and he made it, and he sacrificed a lot to this god. And so he gave, in a way, Freyfaxi as a gift to this god. So that's why he swore this oath. And it was a binding oath. So at this time, if you swore an oath like this, it was not something that you could break. So today, we're gonna see what happened. We're gonna introduce a new character, first of all, whose name is Einar. So I'm gonna read through the whole paragraph, and then we'll look at the sentences in more detail. So, Einar og hesturinn. Einar ungur maður. Hann vinnur fyrir Hrafnkell. Ein dag kindurnar týndar. Einar leitar að kindunum. Einar þreyttur. Hann sér Freyfaxa. Einar tekur hestinn og hann ríður honum allan daginn. Freyfaxi skítugur og þreyttur. Okay, so let's start with the title. So Einar og hesturinn. So Einar is a name, and og means and hesturinn means the horse in the nominative singular. So hestur is a masculine word, it ends in ur, and to say the horse we attach the in, that's the definite article in the nominative form for the masculine. So this means Einar and the horse. So let's talk a bit about this Einar. So Einar ungur maður, hann ungur. So ungur comes from the same root as the English young. So this means young, it's a Germanic root. And maður, we saw maður before, and I want to make this interesting parallel. So we said before, Hrafnkell ríkur maður, and now we're saying Einar ungur maður. So in Icelandic, it's like in English, you say someone, Hrafnkell, for example, Einar is, so hann this is the third person singular conjugation of the verb vera, which is to be. And we have ríkur maður, in the case of Hrafnkell, and ungur maður, in the case of Einar. So you can see that in all these cases, ríkur maður and ungur maður, the ending is ur. That's because maður is a masculine word that ends in ur, and the strong declension of the masculine singular in the nominative also ends in ur. So that's why ríkur is an adjective, which means rich, and ungur is an adjective, which means young. And it has to agree with the noun. In both cases, maður. Okay, so Einar ungur maður. Okay, so and what does Einar do? Hann vinnur fyrir Hrafnkell. So he works for Hrafnkell. So of course, I omitted some things of the story to make it simpler. But basically, Einar ends up finding a job as a herdsman for Hrafnkell. And Hrafnkell tells him, well, you can ride any horse you want, but of course not Freyfaxi. Okay, and Einar says, yeah, sure, I'm not gonna ride Freyfaxi. I'm not looking for trouble, I just need to work. So he ends up working for Hrafnkell. And a few things about this. So here we have hann, which is the nominative form of the third person pronoun in the singular masculine, so he. Vinnur is he works, and something that I confused a lot when I first started out learning Icelandic is Vinur with one N is friend, but Vinur with two N's is work, okay? And this comes from the word, from the same root as the English win. So this used to be, the original Germanic root meant something like to struggle or to labor, to fight. And so it retained the meaning in Icelandic of working. And in English, it turned to something more like struggling but successfully, or winning. So in English, it's more about the result of a successful struggle, and in Icelandic, it's more about the struggle itself. So it's about work, hann vinnur. Fyrir means for, and Hrafnkell is again Hrafnkell. But notice that there's a difference between this Hrafnkell with one L and Hrafnkell with two L's. So Hrafnkell with two L's is in the nominative form, and Hrafnkell with one L is in the accusative form. Why is that? That's because we're saying that he works for Hrafnkell. So fyrir here requires that we use the accusative case. And about the pronunciation of these letters, which are quite tricky and they're very particular of Icelandic, it's not a sound that's present in many languages. I know that Welsh and Nahuatl are languages that have this sound, but they're not that common. So maybe you're struggling with this. So you can think of, let's start with this sound. So the single L is pronounced like sh. So the phonetics are like this. It's like an L, la, 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 but it's a voiceless version of that. So your vocal cords are not moving. So if you put your hand on your throat and you say, you will feel, pronounce an L, you will feel that your vocal cords are moving. But if you try to whisper, you will feel that your vocal cords are not moving. So you don't have to do anything weird with your tongue. It's like an L, but you only change the way you use your voice. So I am alternating between the normal L of English or Spanish and the L of Icelandic. So this is Hrafnkell. And when you have two L's, it's the same, but you have like an invisible T before it. So it's Hrafnkell. So it's like a little. So this one is Hrafnkell and Hrafnkell. Hrafnkell, Hrafnkell. Okay. So don't worry. I know it's quite complicated and it takes practice, but it's important to know about the phonetics a bit, because otherwise maybe you're trying to do something with your throat. It's actually, you only have to do an L and change the way you use your vocal cords. Okay. Good. So let's keep going. Ein dag eru kindurnar týndar. So one day are the sheep lost. So one day the sheep are lost. Ein dag. So here we're using the accusative form of dagur, which means day. I'm sure you've seen before góðan daginn or góðan dag. In both cases, we are also using the accusative. And this is like the word maður or hestur. These are masculine words that end in ur. So remember that last time we said Hrafnkell á hest. And also hestur changed to hest in the accusative, the same as dagur. Dagur is the nominative form and dag is the accusative. So we take the ur out and we get the accusative. Why are we using the accusative here? To say one day. So this is called the adverbial accusative form. Yes, the adverbial accusative form. So tíma þolfall in Icelandic. Basically, this means that when you have a noun phrase, so a phrase made of nouns, that is answering the question when or how long, and is used without a preposition, you typically use the accusative case. Okay, so ein dag, so this is basically giving you information about when something was done or what happened one day, and that's why it is in the accusative. And we don't have any au or I before it. So the default is the accusative form, okay? So this is called the adverbial accusative, or in Icelandic, tíma þolfall. Good, so ein dag eru, this is the plural form of vera, the third person plural, so are, kindurnar týndar. So if you know any German, kind in German means a kid, right? Like a child. But in Icelandic, it means sheep, and it's a feminine word. So it is a feminine word, and so kind is the singular nominative, accusative, and dative form of sheep. Kindur means sheep. So this is the plural form of the nominative and accusative form. So it's important to stress the ur, as we've seen many words that end in ur, like maður, hestur, and these are masculine. This is this masculine singular nominative form ur, but it can also be the feminine plural nominative and accusative form. So basically, context is going to tell you if you're talking about a plural, you're probably talking about the feminine word, and if you're talking about one thing, so in the singular, you're probably looking at a masculine word. So, and then we have the kintur nar. The nar is the definite article for the nominative plural, in this case of kintur. So kintur nar altogether would be the sheep. So kind is sheep, one sheep. Kintur is the plural form, so sheep, many sheep. And kintur nar, it means the sheep. Okay, and then we have tintar. So tintar means lost. Okay, so the sheep are lost. One day the sheep are lost. Let's keep going. What happens next? So Einar leitar að kindunum. So of course Einar is worried, and Einar looks for the sheep. So he looks for the sheep. So leitar comes from the same root remotely as look, and it means to look for. So han leitar að kindunum, and we have so kindunum looks different from kindurnar. Why is that? Because kindunum is the dative form of the word kind in the plural. So it's the dative plural of kind. Why is that? Because leitar is, remember that we saw also the verb ridur. That's one of that 30% that requires that the direct object takes the dative form, so like hestinum, and also kindunum follows the same pattern. So han leitar at requires that you use the dative, so kindunum. And you can see that hestinum and kindunum both end in unum or So the ending is in the dative plural almost always for every gender ends in So that's good to keep in mind. Einar leitar at kindunum. So he looks for the sheep. So Einar þreyttur. Einar is tired. So þreyttur means tired. And something interesting I read is that þreyttur comes from the same Germanic root as the word for threat. But in English, so the original root implied something like pressing or pushing or crowding. So in English, it evolved, that evolved into pressure. But in Icelandic, the sense of hardship or exertion evolved into something more like being exhausted, being tired. Okay, so it's interesting to see how the meaning changes between related languages too. So þreyttur means tired, being exhausted in Icelandic. And always remember to do the pre-aspiration before the two T's. So þreyttur, there's an invisible T before the double. An invisible H before the double T. Þreyttur. So he is tired. And again, it ends in þreyttur because this is the masculine singular form of the nominative, because we're talking about Einar, which is a masculine name. Okay, so Einar, hann þreyttur. Og hann, Einar, hann sér Freyfaxa. So sér here means see. So he sees Freyfaxa. And this is interesting. So again, we have Freyfaxa, not Freyfaxi, because remember that the Freyfaxi is the nominative form of the name, and Freyfaxa could be either the accusative or the dative or also the genitive form of the name. But here it is the accusative. So before we said engin má ríða Freyfaxa, here ríða takes the dative case, so Freyfaxa is in the dative. And where was I? There we go. So hann sér takes the accusative case. So they look the same, but they actually technically they're different cases. But in the names that end in E, like Snorri, like Snorri Sturluson, also ends in E in the nominative and Snorra in all the other cases. So that's good to keep in mind. So he says Freyfaxa. Okay, so he's very tired. He's been looking for the ship. He says, I might lose my job if I lose the ship. So he ends up doing what he shouldn't have. So, yep. So he ends up taking the horse. So Einar tekur hestin og hann ríður honum allan daginn. So let's focus on the first part. So Einar tekur hestin. So Einar takes the horse. So tekur, this is interesting. This is a word that actually comes from Old Norse, and so English took it from the Old Norse. Tekur. There was a word in Old English was something like Niemann. If you know any German, in modern German, you say nehmen to say take, but actually the Norse root replaced the West Germanic root that English used to have. This is also because I will point out this when this happens because I'm very interested in that because. This was mostly during the Danelaw, so the period where when Norsemen were in the north of England for many centuries, and that's why English has many words that come from Old Norse and that were directly borrowed from it. So tekur means take. So Einar tekur hestin. Okay, so hestin means the horse, and we said that hest is in the accusative, so hestin means the horse with the article in the accusative form, because tekur is one of the verbs that requires that we use the accusative. Og hann, so Einar, ríður honum allan daginn. So ríður honum. So honum is the dative form of hann. So the third person singular pronoun is the masculine form, can be hann. It's taught as hann, honum, hans. So in Icelandic, we generally use nominative, accusative, dative, genitive in that order. And so hann is the nominative, hann is also the accusative, and honum the dative, and hans the genitive. So ríður honum, because as we said, ríður takes the dative, so that's why. And when we say honum, we are referring to Freyfaxi, of course. So Einar takes the horse, Freyfaxi, and he rides him, Freyfaxi again, all day, allan daginn. And here we have another example of this adverbial accusative, which is basically saying allan daginn is in the accusative because we're saying he rode Freyfaxi all day. So the difference is that before it said ein dag, but here we have allan daginn because we're saying all the day, because we are referring to a specific day, not just one day, any days, but all the day, something like that. So allan daginn, that specific day. Okay, so Freyfaxi skítugur og þreyttur. So Freyfaxi is skítugur. This is a very interesting word because in English, a word that is morphologically the same is shitty, because skit means shit and ugur is like saying ti, like that is the quality of being shit. But in Icelandic, skit can mean also dirt or excrement too. But in Icelandic, this just means dirty. Okay, so it's not shitty in that way. But this is interesting because skit is a word in Icelandic, also can be like a curse word, like shit. But you will see that Icelandic, many words that in English change to sh, that sound, in Icelandic are sk, like the word for ship in Icelandic is skip. So also keep that in mind. This is a very common sound change in Icelandic. So skítugur means dirty. And again, þreyttur, which we said was dirty. And skítugur takes also the ur ending because it's an adjective that is masculine, singular, and in the nominative form, because we're describing Freyfaxi. Okay, so that's quite a lot. We covered a lot of ground, and we learned that we presented Einar, and maybe we described what is his mistake. He ended up writing Freyfaxi, even though Hrafnkell told him not to. So we'll see what happens next. And that's about it for today. So thank you very much. If you like this video, of course, subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, and you can find a link in the description where you can book a private lesson with me, and you can also find a link to my Ko-fi profile where you can support the channel if you like the series. Okay, so tack för er och bless bless!